Welcome everyone tonight. This is our last program meeting of the year, and it has been one really great year. Uh, go over a few things that happened this year. Number one, the most important, for the first time in the 56 years of the Canal Society being existent, we now have a regular office staff here. And that was a very long road because first we needed to have an office staff, you need an office. And that took many, many, many years of stops and starts and trying to find places. We've been here for 3 years now. We have our executive director, Lori, if you could raise your hand. And we have our admin, Laurel. So yes, that is very confusing, but we're making all kinds of changes. We're making all kinds of improvements. We have all kinds of initiatives we're working on. So it's really big turning point for the Canal Society of New Jersey. What happened, things that happened this year. First of all, Canal Day, our big event in June. We had almost 900 people. That's the biggest Canal Day, at least since I've been involved the last 10 years. Big success. Thank you all for helping out with that. We did two Pathways to History. Pathways to History is the Morris County history event. They did two this year, one in May, one in October, and we did the Wharton Lock Tender's house, which we furnished. So come May, we'll have the next one. If you haven't been out to a Lock 2 East and seen it and seen the Lock Tender's house, it's definitely worth it. We did many other events, like a Pack on Block Party. We did the Warren County Bicentennial celebration. We did Wharton Canal Day, which that's another big one. Booton Day, Old Sucker Sunny Day, and other ones I'm sure I'm forgetting. DNR Canal, we always focus on the Morris Canal, but there is another canal in New Jersey. We've been more involved with that. We're funding sign projects. And Morris Canal Greenway, lots of support there, a lot of interpretive panels. Lou is heading up trail crews for Morris County. We have one in Warren County that I'm on, and this is the first Morris County one. So all kinds of things are happening. New Jersey State Archives, digitizing. And next year, big plans for next year too. We'll be sending out a letter for that. So what's left this year? Not a lot. In December 9th, is the NJTPA meeting. They have a twice a year virtual meeting, and they talk about all the Morris Canal Greenway updates. Joe and I do a presentation. We give you a slideshow of all the different things that have happened this year. So if you're interested in, hey, what's going on in the Morris Canal Greenway, what has been accomplished, what is going to be accomplished, tune into that. We'll send an email out with a link on that. And then after the talk, as we always say, please move into our office area because we have to move this back to where it is, with the tables, and so the cleaning crew can come in and clean it. We will move all the fruit over there. And we have in our office book sales, books for sale, 25% off used. We have t-shirts and hats for sale, and we now accept credit card. Before we used to be cash only now, and that's Lori did that. Thank her for that. Yes, holiday shopping is coming. Okay, so our speaker tonight,
those who had signed up for trail cleaning tomorrow, it's been postponed because of the weather this Sunday.
Okay, and what time is that?
That's the two.
And that's at Plain to East, right? Okay, so if you signed up or you're interested in helping out, that's Ledgewood Sunday, 10 o'clock at I assume meeting in Morris Canal Park, right? Yes, at the park. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, our speaker tonight, Ben Yaskulka. Did I get that right? Hardest part is if I got his name right. So, how do we know Ben? Well, a lot of you know I'm also involved with the Warren County Parks Foundation, and we're in charge of the Morris Canal Greenway for the whole western third of the state. Well, the Morris Canal parallels the Musconetcong River, and then once you get to Hackettstown and east, the two bodies of water intersect. They actually become one at one point. They follow each other very closely. So we do a lot of maintenance work on the Waterloo Valley Trail, and that's where the canal and the river just basically side by side. So one of the things we do, trail clearing and mowing stuff, we also pick up a lot of trash. People are slobs, they leave trash all over the place. A lot of that. So that's where we kind of dovetail with the Musconetcong Watershed, their environmental group, obviously picking up trash, keeping the river valley clean is, their main impetus. So that's how we developed a relationship with them. Every Earth Day, which is in April, we usually have a big cleanup in the Waterloo Valley, Musconetcong River Valley. 2 years ago, we had big, huge piles of bags of trash and tires and stuff we picked up, and we do that in conjunction with the Musconetcong Watershed Association. They pick up all the stuff. This year was a little bit more muted because it was snowing that day, and so we just did a smaller cleanup. But they've been great. They're a great partner helping keeping the Morris Canal Greenway clean, which, is a side thing of keeping the Musconetcong River watershed clean. So without further ado, from the MWA, Musconetcong Watershed Authority, is Ben Yaskulka.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you, everybody, for having me out here today. My name is Ben Yaskulka. I'm the Policy and Outreach Manager for the Musconetcong Watershed Association. Some of the things that I work on there, some of the education programming, as well as our advocacy work. But the thing that I'm most passionate about that we get to work on is our wild and scenic designation, which I'm very excited to get to talk to you a little bit more about today, as well as the interpretive work that we do for the watershed with that. So, a little bit of context. Who are the Musconetcong Watershed Association? Our organization is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to protecting and preserving the Musconetcong watershed for people and nature. So we're not just there to take care of the critters, but we want to make sure that the river and its lands surrounding it are healthy to provide clean water for those critters and for everyone living there as well. Our river is very special. It's a Category 1 river, the highest category of protection standards in the state of New Jersey. It's trout production, trout maintenance. It's one of the best trout hatching rivers in the state. And it's a federally designated wild and scenic river. A little bit of context about the lands in our watershed. We're about 50% forest, 40% agriculture. We're very agriculturally dense as you go south, and as you go north, we get more forested. And only about under 10% urban, and that's including some Main Street areas, more suburban areas. Very rural watershed. We're the largest tributary to the Delaware River in the state of New Jersey at 46 miles long. And our watershed has a 157 square mile drainage area. You can see on here we have our highlighted area. That's our watershed. We're very narrow. We have a lot of tributaries to the Delaware right in this area. So it's a pretty thin strip going down. We have the South Branch to our south, the South Branch of the Raritan River. And to the north, we have the Pollenskill. The Musconetcong Watershed Association, our group, was formed in 1992 due to petitioning from people in the area trying to get the river designated as a way to solve some of the issues that our local residents saw in terms of protecting and preserving the river. We're also in the heart of an area called the New Jersey Highlands. The Highlands are an area of a lot of those tributaries to the Delaware, as well as some other rivers out east in New Jersey, northeast, that provides water to 70% of New Jersey residents. It only takes up about 13% of the land area and provides water to 70% of New Jersey residents. This is the area where New Jersey gets its water supply. So it's very important we keep clean water up here in the north of the state. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because we are not the Musconetcong River Association, we're the Musconetcong Watershed Association. Watershed is that area in which the land has water drain into a specific river. So our watershed, again, is this narrow strip. If you were to drop a drop of water anywhere in the land area mapped out here, it would eventually, either through the groundwater or through runoff, find its way to our river. You dropped just a little bit outside of that border, it would end up either in the Pollenskill to the north or to the South Branch of the Raritan in the south. Now, that wild and scenic designation that I mentioned, what is it? Wild and scenic designation is a designation created by an act of Congress. In 1968, Congress essentially decided that there are certain rivers in our country that have such outstanding values that we should provide them some extra protections. Namely, keeping a free-flowing condition, essentially meaning not damming the rivers. We want to allow them to free flow, identifying them as having exceptional recreation values, historic values, anything that could find value in a river, the Wild and Scenic Program has the potential to help protect. It's a national system. We do handle things a little differently out east than out west, but there are almost 200 wild and scenic rivers throughout the country. Out east, there are 18 what we call partnership wild and scenic rivers. We're the minority group in terms of the two types of wild and scenic. Out west, where they have a lot of federal land, they just call them wild and scenic. We have the partnership program. The reason for that, out west, they have a lot of federal land to work with. Most of the wild and scenic rivers out west are right in the middle of either Forest Service owned land, National Park Service owned land. It's very easy for those government agencies to administer those rivers, make sure that new dams aren't being created, making sure the resource values, the water quality isn't being deteriorated in conditions with the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. Out east, that's a bit of a problem though. We don't have a lot of federal land. We have state land, we have county land, we have municipal land, we have a lot of private land. So how do you administer a river when you have all these competing interests trying to vie for different usage? Well, what they do is they don't want to just bring the hammer down from Washington and say, this is what you're going to do. They find a local partner. For the Musconetcong River, that's us, the Musconetcong Watershed Association. We had a group of local municipalities, all of the counties in the watershed, as well as other partners that come together in a group called the Musconetcong River Management Council, the MRMC. This group consists of all the municipalities and the wild and scenic portion of the river. They come together and discuss something called the River Management Plan, developments coming up in the area that could potentially have implications on the wild and scenic designation and protections, and how to best protect, enhance, and promote those outstanding resource values, outstandingly remarkable values also. We get funds through the National Park Service. Most of the rivers out east are protected by the National Park Service because they're seen as having exceptional recreational value. There are some other agencies that manage more of the rivers out west, but there are 18 protected by the National Park Service out east. We have a cooperative agreement with the National Park Service where they give us funding and say, we put together a work plan. Here's what we're going to do to essentially enact that river management plan and help protect the Musconetcong River. A little context, New Jersey actually is tied for the most partnership wild and scenic rivers of anywhere on the East Coast. Again, we only have those rivers on the East Coast. Just to go through some of the ones that we have, the Musconetcong River up here, Lower Delaware is also designated wild and scenic, as well as the Great Egg and Morris. We also have 3 rivers currently seeking this designation in New Jersey. If we got up to 7, if all 3 of those rivers achieved designation, we would have by far the most partnership rivers in the country. A lot of people don't think of New Jersey as having these outstanding natural resources that you can go to and recreate in. You know, when I was growing up, I always heard from friends out of state that we're the armpit of the United States. And I know it, but it's an unfair characterization of our state. We have some absolutely outstanding lands that are definitely worthy of protection. And just to give the 3 more that are seeking designation, we have the Pollenskill up north. We have the Raritan River just to our south, our neighbor. And then the Mullica River down in South Jersey. Again, if all these rivers were able to achieve that designation, we'd have more than anywhere else in the country, which for a small, dense state, I think would be an incredible feat for us to achieve. Now, I'm going to apologize. This timeline was very hard to fit into a slide, but I think it's important, just a little bit of context about how we got to this designation. In 1991, concerned citizens from throughout the watershed came together and said that we think this river is deserving of this designation. This was right after the Great Egg Harbor was designated. In 92, the Watershed Association was formed and was the entity that was entrusted with pushing for this designation alongside municipal, county, state, and private partners. Throughout the process, going up to 2004, we conducted multiple interest group sessions with, again, all of those partners, including NJDEP, essentially figuring out what do we need to do to achieve this designation, what plans would we have afterwards to make sure that we can actually uphold the designation once we get it. But in 2004, the Musconetcong Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was put forth into Congress, and in 2006, it was signed by President Bush into law. So this was an act of Congress that designated us. It was a very big deal for the area when it happened, and we're very proud to be able to keep going with this designation. And the way we're able to do our work on it is with our river management plan. And I will say it's a bit of a dense document, but it's publicly available on our website, musconetcong.org, under the section titled Musconetcong River Management Council. Has both our original plan, that was the plan that came forward right after we were designated, as well as the updated 2011 plan. Next year, we're actually planning to work on our next update to the plan, updating the zoning and various other things, including a viewshed analysis, which will be in the next plan. But this is our guiding light for our cooperative agreement, the work we do on wild and scenic, and it mentions a lot of the things that we do to help essentially keep the river clean and uphold the standards of our designation. Going through some of the goals, goal 1 is encouraging recreational use that's compatible with the preservation of the watershed. We're a National Park Service partner. National Park Service wants us to have people utilize this outstanding resource that New Jerseyans have right in their backyard. That's right here in Northwest Jersey. We want people to go out and enjoy the river, and promoting it is goal 1 on the plan, but we don't want to do it at the expense of water quality. We want to make sure people are doing it sustainably. We want people to recreate, but take in what you take out, or take out what you take in, things like that. Preserving and protecting archaeological sites and historic structures. History is really important to our wild and scenic designation. It's one of our outstandingly remarkable values. Having the Morris Canal in this area, as well as some other historic values that I will talk about a little bit later in the presentation, was vital. It's an incredible recreational resource, and it's tied to the river. A lot of our history is tied to this river valley. That's why a lot of people came here and reside here. So being able to tell that story through the lens of our river is something that's really important to the plan. Preserving farmland and open space, we want to make sure that there's sufficient open space and farmland that's being sustainably used, that we can essentially use that to recharge aquifers and protect the land from irresponsible development. Preserve, protect, restore, and enhance the outstanding natural resources of the river corridor, the watershed, including endangered species, things like that. We want to make sure that the outstanding natural resource values stay that way for generations to come, so generations of New Jerseyans can enjoy this natural resource. We also maintain existing water quality. Essentially, we don't want water quality to degrade. It's a second point, similar to that first goal, but very specific to water quality. This is where a lot of our wild and scenic bacteria testing, things like that come from. We make sure that the river's not falling behind its original state from when it was designated, and that if there is change, it's only improvement. So, our plan allocated 4 specific, outstandingly remarkable values. And you'll notice I say that word a lot, or that phrase, outstandingly remarkable values. Those are the words from the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act that essentially are the values that make it worthy of this level of protection. So the 4 that were associated with our designation, the recreational values, historic and prehistoric values, the scenic values, and wildlife and critical habitat. For our recreational values, I will say this wholesale, the Musconetcong River has the best trout fishing in the state of New Jersey. I have some friends from some other watershed associations who might want to debate me on that, but we've been ranked that way from multiple fishing organizations for years and years. There's also the river that I grew up fishing on, and I know it very well. There's some fantastic fishing holes for trout. We have one of the best brook trout populations in the state of New Jersey. We also have 50,000 trout stocked into the Musconetcong, which is the most of any single branch of a river anywhere in the state of New Jersey. We're also trout production, trout maintenance, like I mentioned, which basically means our cold water fishery is suitable for brook trout to not only be in, but to repopulate in, which is vital. There are only native salmonoid or trout species. They're actually a species of char, even though we call them a trout, but it's a vital species that we need to protect for future generations of fishermen, as well as people who enjoy our wilderness species. We're a national water trail. This is another national designation that portions of our river have. There are 6 segments to the water trail, and what National Water Trail is essentially a kayak and canoe trail. On our website, musconetcong.org, you can find all of the maps of the National Water Trail and find places that there's easy access to get in to kayak, and they're beautiful areas suitable for kayaking, canoeing that we highly encourage people to utilize. It's a great activity for people to get out on, and I think the Musconetcong is one of the best places in the state for that kind of recreational activity. We also have a lot of trails where the southern tip of the Highlands Trail is right here in the Musconetcong watershed, right by Regalsville. We also have several other fantastic parks that we recommend people visit for the trails. Alamuchee Mountain, Stevens State Park, Point Mountain, and the Musconetcong Gorge being just some of the highlights that I wanted to point out. If you're ever looking for a place to hike, these have varying difficulties. Also on our website, there's a wild and scenic recreation map that I highly recommend anyone who's interested check out. It's a great resource to find places to recreate in the watershed. Also has some great information about some trails that you can go check out. Historic and prehistoric values. One key site that I wanted to make sure I mentioned today was the Plenge Archaeological Site. So on the bottom left of this slide here, you'll see that sign, the Plenge Archaeological Site Historic Marker. This is a sign that's actually right at our offices in Asbury, because right nearby there was an incredibly historic archaeological site that was found. We found things like pottery, arrowheads, spearheads that date back prior to the utilization of bows and arrows by early native peoples that go back 12,000 years. And actually, I'm sorry, 13,000 years. There were some in our office. We actually have some of these arrowheads and spearheads. The oldest that we have in our office is 12,000 years old. It was dated. We have the history of industry in the watershed. Of course, the Morris Canal is a big part of that. I'll talk about that in just a second. But we also have historic mills and lime kilns are abundant in the Musconetcong watershed. These are great things to check out on that map I mentioned, that wild and scenic map. When you find historic trails, a lot of them will have lime kilns nearby. Also, there's a lot of evidence of early industry with various mills throughout the watershed. On the other image on the bottom middle of this slide is the Asbury Graphite Mill. This is a mill that was donated to the Musconetcong Watershed Association by Asbury Carbons, a company that is still in operation that utilized this mill for a very, very long time to produce and utilize graphite. We are now in the process of converting it into an interpretive center for the watershed, both to express the history of the watershed as well as its outstanding natural resource values. And of course, know my audience, we need to talk a little bit about the Morris Canal. I just wanted to emphasize, you can see the overlap that we have with the canal. The Musconetcong watershed is the source of water that was utilized to create the canal. It shaped the history of this region, arguably more than any infrastructure project in the area. It was a vital resource, and it's something that we tie into a lot of our interpretive materials. I'll talk a little bit about that word interpretation in a second. Scenic values. I'm not going to blabber on about it. I'm just going to show you. We have some beautiful scenic vistas here on the watershed. This is a picture that was on NJ Hiking of the Point Mountain Reservation. This is a trail that is accessible. You have to do some uphill climbing to get to it, or uphill walking at least. But there's some beautiful vistas. Alamuchee Mountain State Park, right nearby to the canal. Again, there's some absolutely beautiful vistas. But you don't have to go high to find beautiful sights. The Musconetcong Gorge, this is a picture taken from in the gorge. There's some beautiful areas, creeks, tributaries, as well as the main stem of the Musconetcong. Incredible areas to check out, and I encourage everyone here to take some walks, go on the trails, and check out some of these beautiful areas we have in the watershed. For sure, be careful walking on mossy rocks. We also have wildlife and critical habitat. A few species I want to point out. We are in the middle of what's called Bobcat Alley, the Bobcat Migration Corridor for the Appalachians. You can see this lower portion basically follows the watershed up. We've had bobcat sightings right near our office. They're an incredible species, something that inspires a lot of people. We're high quality fishery. I mentioned brook trout before, but American shad, because of some of our dam removals, are making their way further and further up the watershed. If we're able to remove a couple of more, we can get them almost halfway up the watershed, which would be incredible. They're a migratory species. They go along with American eel, which are also a migratory species. That great resource for fishermen, and an incredible species to check out. Uh, Things that we don't always think about, and one of the endangered species that we find in the Musconetcong would be the brook floater. It's a species of mussel, and I just want to point out they come in these beautiful colors, and I found this image online of one of them, this iridescent green. And we have bird habitat as well. We're in the middle of a lot of the Atlantic flyway. We get a lot of warbler species. I have a black-throated green warbler up here that was taken by me in the Musconetcong watershed, as well as we have a lot of agricultural land, vital habitat, especially pasture land for endangered grassland species in the state of New Jersey. That is an eastern meadowlark, an endangered species of grassland bird that was taken at the farm of one of our board members. When you have pasture land that has native plants integrated into the landscape, a lot of these endangered species really thrive in those kinds of conditions. It's very important to protect these species, especially the ones that are endangered in the state, like the meadowlark. Now, I've talked about some of the values that are worth encouraging people to utilize, but one thing I really wanted to talk to you all tonight is how do you get people out to actually utilize these things? And how do you get them once they're there to engage with the beauty, to actually understand some of the history, understand these species, and not just by lecturing at them. You know, I can go blue in the face talking about Latin names and what habitat is needed and the type of tree that's symbiotic with this kind of bird and all of that. One of the things that National Park Service encourages is a type of storytelling education called interpretation. So, our watershed has an interpretive plan. So, some of the things that we do, we put on activities that allow us to engage with people, to explain some of these things, and tell the story of our watershed through types of recreation people are already doing. We host hikes in partnership with the Highlands Coalition. We host paddles on the Musconetcong River. We have a program called our Junior Ranger Angler Program where we encourage families to come out, fish together. We teach parents and kids alike to come out and enjoy a type of hobby that really brings people together. We do river talks. These are our kind of educational programming. Uh, the way this presentation came about was actually Tim was kind enough to do a river talk with us on the Morris Canal. So we talk about history, we talk about agriculture in the region. We find ways to appeal to different people and through different perspectives on the beauty and importance of the watershed. We also use a lot of signage. We have signage throughout the watershed, not just at our headquarters, that helps interpret some of the natural beauty around when people are hiking, when people are fishing, when people are engaging in these kinds of activities. It provides a little bit of context, and the goal is to make people think, to unveil something about to unveil or reveal something about the landscape to the people who are enjoying it. And as part of our agreement, these are some of the things that we're able to do. Our interpretive plan is something that's actually more recently put together. A lot of these things were just part of our cooperative agreement, but we found that we needed some kind of a plan to help further push this kind of interpretive work, utilize land, water, and history-based signage, activities, and personal experiences to inspire intellectual and emotional connection with the Musconetcong River and its watershed. So, I want to give a little bit of history on this idea of interpretation because it's more recent than you would think. There's a person, Freeman Tilden, who gets a lot of the credit for being the father of interpretation at National Park Service. I like to start a little bit farther back when I get the opportunity to talk about this history with a guy named Enos Mills. He's a mentee of John Muir, so this is like early conservation movement prior to even the founding of the National Park Service. Enos Mills had what he called his trail school in Longs Peak, Colorado. He's often referred to as the father of Rocky Mountain National Park. And his ideas took a little bit longer to get adopted. Again, that guy, Freeman Tilden, gets a lot of the credit because National Park Service really started working on this kind of education and utilization of recreation once he came into the picture. But he's the one who, and I love this quote, came up with the idea that facts are dead unless given flesh and blood through storytelling. The idea of storytelling, getting people to relate through stories about the things that they're engaging with, is crucial to getting people to understand nature and history in a region. So that idea of prior to Tilden, and this is after Mills, but the National Park Service, right after it was founded, it really focused on what they called field professors, which the idea of someone like lecturing at you, and I use this image as kind of the idea, it's the history of avian classification. So it's going through all these Latin taxonomical names and lectures, and it's a lot of stuff that it's important knowledge, but it's boring. It really is. It's really hard to get people engaged with it unless they have a reason to. So this guy, Freeman Tilden, he wrote a book, and actually I'm going to go back because I don't think I pointed out this image. Interpreting Our Heritage is a book that he wrote. I highly, highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in how to get people to engage with natural and historic resources. Uh, he reframed the goal of educating people about the environment from instruction, that field professor type thought, to provocation. He wanted people to actually be engaged and think about these ideas. Again, that seminal work, Interpreting Our Heritage, it codified 6 principles of essentially the difference between field lecturing and education and field storytelling and interpretation. He also founded the idea of the cycle of preservation, which this is something that I think should be key for any environmental group. And I'm just going to quote him because he says it better than I possibly could. Through interpretation, understanding. Through understanding, appreciation. Through appreciation, protection. Understanding, caring, just like you guys do about the Morris Canal, is what keeps these resources alive and keeps people from plowing them down to put in another warehouse or something like that. These are the ideas that essentially keep these resources alive, in use, and keep people understanding these things. So a brief aside about the 6 principles. Relevance, essentially, you want to make sure that any interpretation you're doing, you relate it back to the person who you're talking to. It can be groups as well. If you're talking to anglers, talk about endangered species of fish and how these are things that if we can bring them back, it would be amazing angling opportunities or fishing opportunities. Revelation, having them learn something themselves, essentially. Inspire that further learning. Art, interpretation is an art. You want to utilize arts. Video wasn't essentially something they were thinking about at the time. Paintings, books, storytelling, all of these things that we think of as arts are ways to inspire people to think about our natural and historic worlds. That idea of provocation, getting people to essentially be provoked to want to learn more. Wholeness, you want to address the whole of a resource rather than just parts. Essentially, you can use the part to expand to the whole. And you had a special section about children, essentially saying that any interpretation where children are involved, it should be understandable, but it shouldn't diminish from any adults who you're also talking to. You want it to be comprehensive on the lowest level, but inspiring to the highest. Keeping going, National Park Service after the Tilden Revolution, I'll call it, implemented an idea called Mission 66. This was shortly after World War II, just to give an idea of the timeline. This is where the hardware caught up with the software, essentially, to use a computer term. This is the innovation of the visitor center at national parks locations and at environmental centers, things like that. The idea of having a centralized location, it was moving past the idea of a wooden lodge where people could go just to talk to a park ranger, having materials out like you guys do in your office, even with some of the art and some of the historic, you have the boat in there as well in your office, that some of these ideas of things that you can go in, engage with, and inspire people to go out and actually find the evidence of these things out in the wild, so to speak. This is also where the idea of utilizing pre-recorded audio and video came about. Again, this is shortly after World War II, so having auditoriums, things like that at visitor centers that can inspire people en masse, and essentially turned rangers, National Park Service rangers, from just one-on-one field guides to curators of a museum, essentially, of information and inspirational materials to inspire people to go out and enjoy these parks further after their visit to the visitor center. Continuing to the modern era, there are some more ideas that have come about. I had in the slide here just a couple of people I won't go into too much detail about who essentially progressed the ideas of Mills and Tilden. And the idea of facilitation and co-creation came about. The idea of essentially understanding your audience, working with them to learn together, finding out what they're interested in instead of just assuming, having these conversations to better put together materials and information for people that'll inspire them to go and enjoy these national treasures. So, going back a little bit to that idea of the cycle of preservation, I want to tell a story from a book that I highly recommend, Nature's Best Hope by Douglas W. Talmy, and tell you the tale of the dad and his lawn. So this is just a field example from this book of a way that interpretation was used to inspire further protection and conservation. So this dad in the book, there are three characters in this story, or two characters in the story, the dad and his daughter. The dad loves his lawn. The lawn's pristine, it's pesticided, herbicided, Roundup ready, has this totally perfectly manicured lawn, and a sprout of milkweed shows up like right on the edge of his property. His daughter, being in the conservation field, he calls her and is like, "What the heck is this thing? Why is it growing?" He saw some little spots on it. He's like, "What could those be?" She comes by and explains the story of a plant called milkweed. Now, milkweed is the host plant of one of our most famous butterflies, monarch. She explains the story of how monarchs through multiple generations are able to migrate every year from Canada to Mexico and back. Explains these, shows pictures of these beautiful butterflies and tells the story of this species. That's interpretation in the field. That's active interpretation. Now, the dad, inspired by this, leaves the plant alone. And he goes and checks on it every so often. Now he sees those little dots that he mentioned. Those turn into caterpillars. Those were eggs. They turn into caterpillars. They start eating the milkweed plant. And eventually he sees those caterpillars turn into chrysalises and eventually emerge as monarchs. And he falls in love with these things. He knows their story. He knows their significance to the world around him. And what he does is he starts taking pieces of his lawn and adding more milkweed. He doesn't totally get rid of it. He still loves his lawn. But he starts adding more and more milkweed and essentially taking parts of that lawn and dedicating it to this plant that originally he thought was just a weed he wanted to get rid of. This is the kind of thing that interpretation inspires. It gets people to think about the world around them, understand the stories of the creatures, the history, the environment around them, and gets them inspired to want to do something to protect it. So, some of the reasons to care, and I'm going to say this is about interpretation and general recreation. There's physical health benefits to getting out, getting inspired, walking around, seeing these trails, and learning more about the environment around you. Mental health benefits to getting out there. There's an inherent value to the joy that's found in getting out there and finding these things out. And spending time somewhere makes you care. Spending time doing something, spending time understanding something like this, it gets people to care. It comes back to that cycle of preservation. So, how do we inspire these things at the Musconetcong Watershed? Well, one of our key elements, and I mentioned this before, is our wild and scenic map. This is not the map side, but this is some of our information, and it focuses on 4 key themes that we have in our interpretive plan and that we focus on through our interpretive work. On the water, talking about the fish, fishing, getting people to recreate, kayaking. On the land, people interested in hunting, birding, hiking in general. Heritage deep and strong, this is where that history comes in. Canal, the ancient history of American peoples. And then working in partnership. No one works alone. We all need help from our friends sometimes. And working with partners like the Canal Society, New Jersey Audubon, the Highlands Coalition, all these groups come to mind to help get this word out and to help people better understand specialized parts that we might not fully focus on, but that we definitely encourage is super helpful. Now for our map side, I want you all to notice these little dots, and I'm going to zoom in on them in a bit. But what this map site essentially has is all of the recreational accesses that we could put together when we put together this map in the watershed. It has details about what you can do where. So I'm zooming in here around Alamoonchee State Park, around where the Musconetcong and the Morris Canal overlap. And you'll see that all of these sites, you can see Douglas A. Blake Memorial Field, Florence Kuiper's Park, Stevens State Park, Waterloo Village. All these sites have all these little black dots, and our legend tells you exactly what kind of recreational opportunities are at each of these sites. So you can look at this map, say you're a hunter, you can find out exactly where to go hunting in the watershed, and a lot of these sites will also have interpretive materials to inspire people to learn more. Same with fishing, wildlife observation and photography, hiking, boating, canoeing, camping, all of these different things. It also has information, say you're with young kids, where there's bathrooms nearby. You want to make sure that something like that is there if you're a young family or something like that. First aid stations being nearby, places to picnic, playgrounds. Also points out ranger stations, like our headquarters, the River Resource Center in Asbury, where younger people can do junior ranger programs, which is an interpretive booklet that we give out, that we created one specifically for the Musconetcong, and the kids can actually get sworn in as junior park rangers there, which is a really cool program. We also do this through signage. Again, we have signage throughout the watershed, but I want to focus in on the MWA's educational trail. We have two signs here that I wanted to point out. We have a bunch of these smaller signs that just have little tidbits, might point out a species or two, might point out a little bit of the history of the region, things like that, just to get people thinking about where they are, what might be nearby, give you something to look for, and then be inspired yourself if you can find it. We also have our educational trail, not a trap. Educational trail entrance sign, and there's something really cool in here that I recommend you check out. It's on our website, as well as at the entrance to our trail, there's a QR code. There's an entrance in the language of the native people, the Ramapo Lenape, of the area, and it has a whole welcome and talking about the history in their native language, and it has an English translation on the sign as well. It's one of the coolest pieces of interpretive work that I think we've done. We did it in partnership with the Ramapo Lenape, and it's actually the current chief of the Ramapo Lenape who did the actual speaking in their native language for the greeting to the trail. And lastly, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the events that we put together. So I mentioned we do paddles. Paddles are really great as a resource to get people onto the water, understand that you can get on the water to get engaged, whether it's through wading, whether it's through kayaking, canoeing, other kinds of boating in some of the lakes that we have in the watershed. Our junior ranger program, this is one of the casting lessons. We have a partner from Trout Unlimited there, teaching some people how to fly cast, how to fly fish and cast with a fly rod. It's one of the coolest events that we do. We have kids and their families come out. A lot of times there are families. Fishing's a generational hobby. A lot of times if you don't have a parent or a grandparent or an uncle who can teach you how to fish, it's a hobby lost to a lot of families. So this gives people an opportunity to come together, have the parents learn with the kids, and inspire a whole family in this generational hobby. You'll also see our friend over here, Tim, just to show some of our river talks. We had a river talk at Waterloo Village about the canal. So we do these river talks on history. Agriculture was one that we did in the past, agritourism, and various other topics that you can find and get inspired by in the watershed. And as a shameless plug for the last thing on here, because this is an upcoming event, and I think this is cool. It's a fundraiser, but it's also a way to get people inspired. We're partnering with a local brewery in Hackettstown to do a trivia night that's going to be focused on the Musconetcong, which a lot of times there are people who would be interested in trivia, might not otherwise be inspired to come out onto the river. But the idea is if they're coming and they're doing trivia about the watershed, they're learning about it, it might inspire them to want to go out and engage with the land around them. So that's actually coming up December 4th. Highly encourage anyone who's interested to come out and do some trivia, learn a little bit about the watershed and the waters around. We might have some questions on the canal that I have a feeling we have some specialists in this room for. So with that, first off, I want to thank you all again so much for having me here, and I'd be happy to take some questions for a bit as well.
You encourage people to come out on the trails. Do you run into a conflict with the bird lovers who don't want people to scare the birds away?
I haven't personally, so I'm a birder. I go out and do bird photography, and a lot of times I actually find that the more people you have, especially the more people who are interested in that kind of thing, you'll get people pointing out like, oh, there's this rare bird that's been flying around here for a long time. Go check it out. And that inspires people. That's interpretation, even if the people who are pointing it out don't recognize it as such. So obviously, if you have too many people going out and littering and not respecting the environment around them, that's a problem that could happen. But as long as people are being respectful of the land around them, I don't think that that would be a problem.
What would you consider a beaver dam? Is that something that you would leave?
So, as not an expert on that particular area, I will say we actually do have a volunteer who is doing a study on beavers in the Musconetcong, which is incredibly cool. This is actually a pretty recent thing. But generally, beaver dams aren't going to create the same obstruction as a human-made dam that will have safety issues, have the greater capacity to fail and cause property damage, and potentially have implications on safety to human life. So hopefully that answers your question. But again, I don't want to proclaim myself as a greater expert on dams than I am.
So with that, you showed, at the beginning of your presentation, you showed the line of several of the rivers, but there were gaps.
Let me see. Is it the historic, the 1800s canal map? This one? No? Oh, I know what you're talking about. Let me find this. This one?
Exactly, you've got ponds, connected to the river, but there are gaps between.
So, fantastic question. So, not the whole river is designated. We're not designated all the way to our headwaters, mostly because there are certain areas that are still dammed. So, the actual designation it requires a free-flowing section. So, all of the sections that are outlined are in full free-flowing condition. And these are the areas that were designated by Congress. The whole area has been studied, and there's potential if we remove more dams, things like that, to have more of the river designated. But a majority of the river is designated. These are the sections that are essentially further protected by the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act.
How many man-made dams still exist on the Musconetcong?
Main stem, not too many, but there are some tributaries that still have a few. I think I can think of Warren Glen and the Asbury Dam are two of the biggest ones that we're looking into removing. As you go up, there are a few more. Saxton Falls, for example, is one that we don't plan on touching. We know that there's a lot of historic value there, and the potential risk doesn't outweigh the reward of removing it. But the two that we are actively looking at on the main stem are the Asbury Dam and the Warren Glen Dam. We're also looking at removing a few more on the tributaries, but for them, we still do have dams. It's still something that we're working on, but the sections that are wild and scenic are free flowing.
Yeah. Speaking while we're on dams, you know our favorite dam in Waterloo.
Yes.
Contributing asset to the village of Waterloo and the canal. And how do you feel about
So
saving that dam?
So historic value is something that you have to take into consideration. So I'll give the example of probably the big bad of dams on the Musconetcong. Warren Glen, if that thing were to fail, there would be significant potential for loss of human life, property damage. There have been times where kids have gone playing on there and they risk falling in, getting sucked into the current, things like that. Waterloo doesn't fall into that kind of a category. It's not something that's been a priority for the Musconetcong to remove. And again, we acknowledge that there's historic value in some of these.
And then there's Saxton Falls.
I mentioned Saxton Falls a little bit ago. Again, that historic value, and we recognize that as an important landmark in the region.
I just want to say, I swam in the Morris Canal, Saxton Falls.
That's awesome. I've seen. Okay.
By President Bush, I think.
Yes.
There was a 2-year period there where you applied, if he beneficially did it. What was your weakest point that you were most worried about, that you weren't gonna make criteria?
So unfortunately, I wasn't with the organization. Actually, wasn't born yet at the point when we were seeking the designation. By 2006, I was a little tot, but some of the dams definitely would have presented an issue because of that free-flowing condition requirement. But that's why we were able to segment off parts, and we have segments A, B, C that you can see. on here. Segment C was actually the most recently designated. There was a contingency in the act that essentially allowed us, if we were able to meet certain conditions, to get it designated later on.
Second part, goes to the dam. If certain dams you know you're not going to get rid of, okay, like Saxon Point, okay. What about spillways
Like
for fish,
Fish.
eel, and
fish ladders, things like that. It's something we've looked into. We had an analysis done on the Asbury Dam, or that I think is still being done on the idea of a fish ladder there. It's definitely an interesting solution. When I was in Acadia National Park recently, I saw a fish way, and it's really inspiring the way that they were able to essentially put in the infrastructure to allow a historic dam that's up there to stay and to allow essentially free-flowing condition to move around it. So there are other solutions as well for some of these more historic dams. Some of these are definitely, something that we'd be thinking about way in the future. We have some really pressing safety concerning dams. To again focus on that Warren Mill, Warren Glen Dam. It's rated as by the New Jersey Dam Removal Society as the #1 priority in the state of New Jersey dam to remove. It's a project we've been working on for a very long time. Does that answer your question? Okay.
encourage you to look at these buildings?
What did you?
Nope.
So the shed can't get up the Musconetcong very far because of the Asbury Dam.
Not all the way, no. And that's something that we definitely want to be able to encourage. There's some imagery around the Hughesville Dam, which is the most recent dam that we removed of shad pretty quickly, within about, I think, a year, moving straight up past where the dam site was through the restored area. And I think there's an image of a NJDEP biologist you can find on the Fish and Wildlife website. There's also a link to it on our website of her pulling out one of the first shad that was identified to move past that dam site. But it's definitely something that, migratory fish passage is one of the key things that provides grants to get these dams out. So it's a big priority for us to be able to try to get these shad, American eel further up the watershed.
And somebody caught a northern skipper and with the where I noticed that northern snake.
So there are a bunch of invasive species that are priorities for us. New Zealand mud snail was a big one that came out. I haven't heard any correlation between dam removals and them being able to move up. Generally, the biggest thing that moves things like that around, especially the New Zealand mud snail, for example, is people will go kayaking, canoeing, or wading in the river, walk around, want to latch on, you move up river, you get back in. Now it's moving around the stream. It'll detach and move around. We actually do have at a few sites, including our education trail, cleaning stations where we have interpretive materials essentially explaining the situation and encouraging people to scrub off a kayak, a canoe that they launched nearby, as well as waders, just to get those things off and essentially make sure that we're able to keep these invasives from moving around in the river.
You mentioned water supply for drinking water.
So that's more of a general area. That's not just the Musconetcong that I was talking about there. There's an area called the New Jersey Highlands, which is essentially a good chunk of the northern half of the state. The New Jersey Highlands Act was passed a little over 20 years ago, protecting the water because there's this 13% of the land area in the state having providing water for at least some water for 70% of residents. It's a grander part of the state than just us, but we do work with partners who are in the Highlands, and we work with the Highlands Council on some of these drinking water things. Issues like PFAS, things like that, contaminants, and how they apply to our watershed. PFAS being the emergent contaminant. In Washington, right across from our office, the second largest concentration of PFAS in the country was actually recently found. And we very quickly were able to put on a river talk in coordination with the EPA to talk about what this might mean. We helped do some well testing with things like that. So we do a lot of work to make sure the drinking water in the watershed is good as well.
I mention that because the Delaware and Raritan Canal is a major water supply for central New Jersey, and part of that water comes from Musconetcong.
Yes. And again, that whole, do I have a good, let me see if I have a, just like New Jersey, and I'm going to apologize to our online people as I step over here to kind of draw a line. the highlands will essentially kind of go like this across the state. And it includes the Delaware, it includes this whole area of tributaries as well as rivers out east here. All of which contribute to that large percentage of water quality or of water quantity for drinking in the region.
Yes, one more, the water chestnut. I believe that's coming down from Lake Apacog, and that's a terrible problem in the canal at Waterloo. For several seasons now, we've been able to run our canal boat for only a short period of time, and then it's clogged with water chestnut and clogs the propeller, and we're out of business.
So water chestnut's definitely a concern. We have invasives are probably one of the biggest issues that the conservation world faces today. There's so many multiflora rose, Calgary pear, Phragmites comes to mind as a really big one, especially at one of the dam removal sites we've had in some of the tree planting areas. Mowing that Phragmites down is just a huge part of the project. So all of those invasives take a lot of time and effort to remove. The best way to squash them is prior to their full establishment. If you remember when the spotted lanternfly came about, the idea of squashing everyone you see before they exploded was the best, essentially, chance to keep them down. And there have been some other things that have taken them down. Some of the native fauna have been eating them, which love that. But invasives management, a big way to fight it is just to make sure that we're getting our natives established, doing the work when we're planting natives to essentially prevent those things from happening. But it's definitely a problem that, having to try to remove all of these invasives is a big undertaking. Yes, so it's still around. It hasn't stayed as big a problem as it initially thought, but it's still an invasive. Maple trees, grapevine is a big one that especially young spotted lanternflies, because they have a very thin bark layer, are able to feed off of, and it's a potential issue for those kinds of crops, as well as some of our natives, again, like maple trees, sugar maples in particular, which already have some issues because we're at the very southern tip of their range. So yes, they are still an issue, but considering what it first looked like when they first came out, and I'm sure people have stories about seeing the trees entirely covered in these things. It's something that's still being researched. They're still relatively new invasive in consideration with some of the others that have been around for much longer, but it's still a problem. Not quite as bad as we initially thought, but still something we definitely need to address.
Thank you.
Wait, we got some questions on.
Oh.
Okay, first question. Are there any plans to enhance natural interpretation at Waterloo? And thanks for being here tonight.
Again, grateful to be here. And so one of the things that we're doing as part of our interpretive plan is an interpretive roundtable that I've talked to Tim about the Canal Society, as well as the administration from the state at Waterloo about being a part of. Essentially being able to enhance what's already there, being able to share interpretive materials is something that would be a goal from those roundtables. So that would be one way that we might be able to help, but something that's directly planned right now, we don't have anything, but we're hoping those roundtables will have opportunities for us to enhance not only Waterloo, but work with all of our partners to enhance interpretation throughout the watershed.
Second question, what's the size of the organization? And how many people?
Right now, we have 4 full-time staff plus 1 executive director. So we are currently at 5 strong. Small but mighty.
And last question, the Nature Conservancy is working actively on dam removal, like the Columbia Dam. Does your organization coordinate with them?
100%. We coordinate with them they have a dam removal policy committee that I serve on, as well as they have a dam removal committee that our organization is a part of as well. So it's a team effort to get dams out throughout the state and working together for legislation that will help advance getting rid of these things, having people understand the safety concerns. All of these things are things that we want to work with partners on, including TNC.
Or on the Musconetcong?
Not on the Musconetcong, at least. I'm not super familiar with. Paul and Skill. Okay. Neighbors to the north.
That was the last question. There were a bunch of congratulations and thank yous for presenting.
Again, thank you all for having me.
Hey, thank you, folks, for coming tonight. You are all welcome to go across the hall into our office. We'll move the food there. If you want some more food, you can browse, you can buy books or t-shirts, and come join us over there if you like. If I don't see you, have a great holiday season and a very happy new year.